This boot was unexpectedly good value a few months ago. Now they are unexpectedly incredible value. Why? How you going? Welcome back to Bootlosophy, and hello, I'm Tech, filming on Wajak Noongar Buja here in Perth in Western Australia. So this is the Nomad Heritage Mock Toe from the relatively new brand Dievier. I have previously reviewed the original mock toe model called the Nomad 2.0, and this heritage model is an improvement on it, as you'll see when I go on to talk about the construction. Now, Dievier do a lot of work with John Bristow, who's on YouTube and Instagram as the Happiness Carpenter. John helps them out by trying and critiquing the development models and then gives them feedback before production. So Dievier was started by people who I think are based in the San Diego area in California in the US, but they make their boots in Leon in Mexico. If you watch boot reviews a lot, you know that Leon in Mexico is probably the largest world center of boot and shoemaking. And apart from making footwear for global companies like the Nikes and Timberlands of the world, also make footwear for household American brands. And in the boot world, brands like Thursday and even a line of Drew's boots. Quality can be okay to good to really good, like with one of my favorite boots, the Thursday Captain. And the Dievier Nomad Heritage is probably in that class. They source their components locally from uppers to outsole and maintain an ecologically sound manufacturing process, as well as help support the local economy. Their website, there is an affiliate link down below, their website's a bit sparse about their founding and history, and what I got from it was that they focus on their product rather than on themselves, and in these days of self-aggrandizement and ego, that's refreshing. And before we go further, know that I was given this pair for review purposes, but with no personal or commercial relationship to the brand. And with my usual disclaimer I make to them, that what I say in this review was my honest opinion and they could not affect what I wanted to say. Let's go on to talk about the style and aesthetics of the Nomad Heritage. Clearly, it's a mock toe design. Now, for beginners, mock toe is the short form for moccasin toe, so called because of the similarity in look to the moccasins made by First Nations Americans. It defines the original two-piece design of the vamp stitched to the sides of the shoe and is typified by this mock toe stitch on the apron. In this case, the mock toe stitch is actually a puckering up of the edge of the vamp. It's all one piece of leather. In the original Nomad and in the 2.0, it was a two-piece construction. And there's an argument that this one-piece leather is a little more durable and water resistant. The Nomad Heritage has a rounder toe box as well, whereas the original had a more almond-shaped toe. From the side, the Heritage model is chunky and roomy in the toe, and to me, is the right proportion to go with the 6-inch shaft and the visually chunky black wedge sole. Now, I like the natural edge to the midsole because it cuts the boot into two visually. And I think if it were like a solid mass of black, it might look too heavy and out of proportion. It has a single piece backstay, which also forms into a pull loop. And because the leather here is thinner and the loop tends to flatten out with use, I like it because it doesn't catch on your pants. It also has this stitch along the side of the quarter, similar to the stitch on the original Thorogood Classic mock toe. But in that case, it's a decorative stitch, whereas in this case, it really does stitch the lower half of the quarter to the shaft portion. The hardware is in bright brass, all eyelets, and it befits the chunkiness. The laces that come with the boots is a thick, round, nylon chunky pair of laces. Next, let's talk about the outfits you might wear with the Nomad Heritage. Okay, look, it's designed as a work boot, or at least looking like a work boot, and capable of being used as a work boot. John Bristow, the Happiness Carpenter, even wore a pair with a composite toe. This one doesn't have a composite toe. John wore a pair with a composite toe as his work boots during the Stitch Down Patina Thunderdome for 6 months. For new boot enthusiasts, the Thunderdome is a competition organized by Ben of the Stitch Down podcast, where enthusiasts wear one pair of boots for 6 months to see how they patina. Anyway, what I was saying was that as a work boot based boot, I usually steer clear of saying what outfits go with it, in respect of people who really work with their hands on manual labor, who wear these as a tool. But in this case, I think it's also a great casual boot. And for all of us boot collectors who don't work with your hands, or maybe even if you are a manual worker and sometimes want to wear these out for a good night, what would you pair them with? In this black aniline leather, my instant thought is to wear them with a mainly black or black based outfit like black jeans, a grey top, and since it's winter, I have on a grey polo neck and a Thursday black matte racer jacket. You can and probably should pair them with denim. I think a dark denim or dark fade, not a light wash, or the black will be too stark. Match the top with a fleece check shirt and a wax jacket like the Huckberry Flint and Tinder wax trucker. Link below, by the way. The fleece shirt is from Proper Cloth from my Bootlosophy collection. The beauty is that in this black aniline leather, you can pair them with almost any neutral or earth-based color. Black, gray, blue, green, brown, and if you like them, even colors like plum. Just make sure that they are darker colors, otherwise that black chunk will look too stark and overpowering. By the way, if you use the link down below to the Bootlosophy collection from Proper Cloth, you can use the code BOOT10, BOOT10, to get 10% off any item on the site, whether it's from the Bootlosophy collection or not. If you like that smart casual style that I generally like and wear, it's worth a look, just saying. Okay, moving on to construction. And I will take some time to detail this, even though if you're a long-time subscriber, you'll have heard me talk a lot before about the different construction methods. I once asked if I should shorten this section, but a lot of commenters either like this part or tell me that they're new to boots and appreciate the info. So here we go. I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. At the bottom is the outsole, and this is the Vibram wedge sole. Vibram is an Italian company founded by Vitali Brahmani in the 1930s and is a beloved outsole manufacturer around the world. Now, I don't know what model number this is, but it's not really the full wedge sole. It's only a 5 or 6 mil thick full slit outsole with a grippy pattern of low lugs and swirls. It serves as durable protection of the wedge sole itself, which is a softer, foamy rubber for all-day comfort, and goes from about 25 mils at the heel to about 10 millimeters at the ball and toe. When I go on later to talk about comfort, this will feature. The Vibram outsole is glued onto the wedge, and then the wedge is glued onto the midsole. The sole construction is then attached to the uppers construction using the Goodyear welt form of construction. In Goodyear welting, the uppers are formed around a foot-shaped mold called a last, and the uppers are turned inwards. They're stitched to the insole inside the boot, as well as to the inner edge of a strip of leather called the welt. Now, in this case, the welt goes all the way around the boot, hence it's described as a 360-degree welt. The outside edge of the welt is then stitched to the midsole. Now, sometimes the stitch goes all the way through the outsole, but not usually in the case of most wedge sole boots. Modern glues are good enough to hold the wedge sole to the stitched midsole. The advantages of Goodyear welting, they're often quoted as being more water resistant because the stitches don't go all the way from the inside to the outside. There's an inside stitch and then an outside stitch. Also, they're certainly recraftable and resolable by a good cobbler when you wear out the outsoles. A word of warning, the Vibram plate protects the soft foam rubber wedge. Keep an eye on it. If you wear past that Vibram layer, especially at the heel, you may quickly wear out the rubber foam wedge, and then replacing everything could start to get a bit pricey. Here's another interesting observation, and maybe it could be a con. The soft rubber wedge might squish and wear out even before the Vibram plate, particularly if it's polyurethane. We'll have to see. Okay, keep going. Inside the boot, the 3 to 4 millimeter welt goes around the perimeter of the boot, and that forms a cavity in the middle. This is filled with cork for cushioning. Now, I'm not sure there is a shank. That's the thin piece of steel or other hard, flexible material that usually sits in the cork between the heel and the ball of the foot. Generally, it adds arch support and stability, but in the case of wedge sole boots, they're often left out because the wedge itself creates the arch support. However, for work boots, they're often inserted anyway because it also holds up the arch when you're up a ladder stepping on a rung. The quality of the materials is reflected in the use of the veg-10 insole, welt, and midsole. Always nice to have natural materials around and under your foot. Moving on up, still inside the boot, the roominess of this last allows Dievier to insert a removable foam-based leather-topped insole. Again, this adds to comfort. The boot is fully leather-lined with a soft natural tanned leather that's really soft to the touch. The uppers are made from a Mexican tanned, chrome-tanned aniline leather. It's over 2 to almost 2.5 mils thickness, but because it's chrome-tanned, it feels quite supple and soft on the hand. The lining takes the thickness to over 3 mils and adds a little bit of structure. Now, aniline leather is bovine full grain. If you look closely, you can see the grain, the follicles and some wrinkles of the animal. It's tanned with an aniline dye, or that's a stain really, so that the dye covers the surface but doesn't hide the grain. Interestingly enough, for an aniline dye, I'd expect to see natural brown on the rough outside. But in this case, in some aniline dyeing processes, they obviously let the hide sit in a dye vat because the rough side, or what I can see on the edge, is also black. In time, I don't think this will T-core, but I'd expect some lighter shade to show up as the dye starts to fade. The pattern pieces comprise of a vamp and side piece, 2 upper quarters, the backstay, and a 2-section tongue. The toe box of the vamp is all one piece, but the apron stitch is sewn around to create the 2-piece moccasin construction look. At the sides, the vamp and lower quarter piece is stitched to the upper quarters, and then the backstay is stitched on and forms the pull loop at the end. The tongue is sewn onto the vamp. It's gusseted halfway up to the 5th eyelet, and it comes in 2 sections. The joint is about where the gusset is, and it creates a more comfortable tongue as it folds over. In between the lining and the uppers leather at the heel, they insert a leather heel counter, and then on the inside, they also stitch in a suede cover to grip your socks and prevent slippage. I'm not sure what the toe stiffener is made from. The top of the collar is rolled. That's a really nice finish there, but the edges of the lace facings are just cut leather. And then to finish off, they use a 7 all eyelet combination in bright brass. I wouldn't have said it's the best gauge brass, but the backs are very nicely finished off, so they're not scratchy at all. They're not star pressed, no scratchy bits. All in all, solid and well constructed with no false cuts or stitching errors, and all the stitching is neat and consistent, quadruple and double and triple stitch, so it feels solid and sturdy. As I said, surprisingly good quality, better than expected, and wait till I tell you the price. As for how you care for this leather, firstly, you'll have heard me often enough, keep it clean and brush it often. Full grain leather is easy to care for if you do both, because its enemy is fine dust and dry dirt, which can scratch the natural surface. Just clean it with a damp cloth when it's dirty, and every so often, give it a very good brushing with a good quality horsehair brush. When you do condition this, how often depends on how often you wear it and what you do when you wear it, but at least twice a year. When you do condition this, a wax-based conditioner like Venetian shoe cream is good. I think you can use something like Big 4, but note that has a bit more chemical in it. Something greasy like Obernoff's might be okay, especially if you want to waterproof it a bit. Now, that obviously will not darken the black leather, but if you opt for one of the other colors, like the olive, for example, I would be careful. A note about the foam wedge sole. It is soft, and that means that they may be a bit porous at the sides. So I'd take some attention to brush them clean too, and maybe even apply a little wax on them from time to time. Now let's talk about sizing, fit, and comfort. They are labeled as true to size. I find them roomy, and if you like your boots snugly fitted, you may want to consider going a half down, but I'd email them to check, maybe with your measurements. I am an 8.5D on the US Brannock device. This is 8.5D, true to size, but I do find the last generous. It's not too big, and I do like my fit this way, but it certainly doesn't snug up my heels and ankles. Certainly the toe box is roomy, and I couldn't get away with removing that foam insole. However, I don't find it uncomfortable when I walk, which you do sometimes if the toe box is too big. With a shoe that is too big in the toe, your toes can get tired when you walk a lot because they kind of have to scrabble for purchase and the toes get a bit tired. These don't feel that way. As for comfort, whew, so comfortable. That means despite the generosity, the fit is good in my opinion, true to size, especially as my feet, while technically D width, are higher volume around the ball of the foot. And as a good fit, it makes it comfortable to stand in. That fit is aided and abetted by the construction and materials, the removable insole, the softer wedge, the wedge itself, and the inner leather lining. These are indescribably comfortable to stand and walk in all day, and that also adds to the value they bring, I think. If there is a con in the fit, I wish the fit around my ankle was a little less generous, as well as the fit around the heel. Time to sum up. I'm struggling to see cons in this boot. Now, I know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of the price and maybe judging it by that price. It is definitely not a Pacific Northwest boot. It's not made with all that leather under your feet, and it's quite light. The uppers aren't the same as Horween and Seidel and so on, and you can feel it. It's not as finely made as, say, Grant Stone or even Parkhurst, or going back to American classics, as firmly durable as, say, a Red Wing mock toe. But it is unexpectedly well made. The overall sturdiness is better than some Thursday models. I think beat other Mexican brands of this price range and is right up there with a more budget American brand like Thorogood. The price? Well, it was $180, but it's gone down. Yes, gone down. In a social media post, they said that they had several customers in the US complain that when the boots arrived in the US, they had to pay a US customs bill for the new tariff. Sorry, they said, not our problem because we don't charge that. US customs does, and we can't control it. And then a few weeks later, they helped out their US customers by dropping their prices. They are now $150. Unbelievable. When I got them, they were listed as 342 Australian dollars, and now they're 260. At that sort of pricing, they are ridiculously good value. But anyway, go check out their website and make up your own mind. And with that last admonishment, that is the end. Of course, folks, remember to click on like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Come back next week, another review of another interesting boot. Meanwhile, you take care out there, stay safe, and see you again soon.